for joining us. Hello, Cryptastic Land. This is Chad Lewis joining us tonight. He's actually a Wisconsin native, as am I. I'm not only picking Wisconsin people, I swear. The last few times this happened to be Wisconsin people. I can't help it how cool we are, okay? And Chad is joining us from southern Wisconsin. He, I guess, grew up in Eau Claire, which is western Wisconsin, but apparently you've gone all over the country and other countries investigating all these different things, paranormal things, legends, folklore, mythological creatures, things like that. So we're just going to take some time to just go through different ones and talk about his experiences. And also he's written a lot of books. How many books have you written, you think?
I think the last was 25.
Oh, okay. Well, I have like 4 of them.
Yes.
So I've barely a lot more to go. But yeah, there's a lot that are about Midwest areas, but there are some that are some of the other states. Do you have any that are about different things in different countries, or are they all United States, the books?
Yeah, so far everything's US based that are road guides and travel guides to these places.
Okay. When did you start getting interested in this kind of thing? Like forever, you were always interested in it?
I blame it on Wisconsin, my home state. Not only do we have the UFO capital of the world here, we have 3 of them. So when I was in high school in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I grew up there and it was near Elmwood, which where a lot of people were seeing UFOs. So in high school, I went to interview people, seeing what they were seeing in the sky. And then not long after, I started studying psychology at UW Stout. And that's what I was really interested in, is why some people believe in the supernatural and others do not.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at human perception and belief systems and presenting at research symposiums. And after the program, people would come up and say, I need help. I think my home's haunted, or I saw some creature in the woods I can't explain. Can you help me out? So it really just went from there through graduate school and beyond.
Wow. And so that's really all you've done since college. Like you were always into this, then you didn't have other jobs, or you just got into this and kept going with it. Is that right?
Yes. And when I started out, I was like a lot of researchers. I'm going to solve a lot of these cases, figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people that get into it with that mentality that I had, you burn out very quickly because you might go to a lot of places, a lot of folklore and legends, and nothing happens. So they get burned out. So early on, I saw it more of an adventure,
Mm-hmm.
of looking at it more as a folklorist or historian, going to these places, collecting the stories, interviewing witnesses, and the adventure of taking the back roads and stopping at these roadside attractions that I'm addicted to,
Mm-hmm.
like the world's biggest ball of twine, or
I stop at every one I come across.
Yeah.
I make the kids get out. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
One of my favorite series of books is the Oddball series by Jerome Poland.
Okay.
Oddball Wisconsin, Oddball Texas, so on. That is a compilation of all these roadside attractions, where they are, how to get to them. So if you're a sucker for that, you have to have that in your glove compartment.
No, I'm gonna have to look into that.
It's probably downloadable now too as some type of app, but this was old school when just the book.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about one thing that I was just thinking about when I was looking at one of your books, this hidden headlines of Wisconsin. I think you have some other states similar title.
Yes.
But it's funny to me because I live in a small town, and sometimes you get these small town newspapers and their little headlines are, some about some poker game at somebody's house, or these just crazy little snippets of things. But yeah, so to me this is really fun to look through, like this one kidnap attempt made on Carnival Dwarf. Or there was one, a young man went insane from smoking cigarettes, apparently.
Yes.
Boy acts like mad dog. Like these, they're just hilarious to me. you know, what people thought needed to be put in a newspaper back then.
Well, remember back then, and those were stories mainly from the late 1800s, early
Mm,
1900s. Not only newspapers were your source of information, they were your source of gossip. They were the Facebook and Instagram of their
right.
time.
Hmm.
So oftentimes people would flip to the newspaper and they'd read what was going on with their neighbors. So and so's cousins visiting from Alabama,
Hmm.
or Mr. and Mrs. Smith just got back from a trip to New Orleans. So
Right.
that was the way to keep abreast of all the information. But they also put the weirdest stories in there that you could ever imagine. And that's what caught my attention when you get these stories of half human, half dog being born, or
Hmm.
jump roping causes death. Those type of things really fascinated me. Just things you don't see in mainstream papers from today's time.
Right. Do you think some of that kind of thing spurred these myths or folklore legends and things because of what was in papers and would get kind of misconstrued?
Especially, I mean, Wisconsin based, the Hodag and
Hmm.
Rhinelander got all kinds of newspapers around the country were covering that. And that spawned the whole myth of the Hodag, where even to today, I get people contacting me asking how they could go see one or capture one, thinking that it's some real beast out there in the woods, conflating it with, cryptids and other
Yeah.
alleged monsters. But so I think the media often was back then, they did it with a wink and a nudge, that they were talking about these legends and having fun with it.
Hmm.
Where back in those days, remember, this was P.T. Barnum from Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus that would hoax people with the Fiji mermaid, and he'd actually have exits posted with wrong signs, so people would go out and they'd have to pay to come back in, and they thought that was fun because they were tricked. They saw it as some type of
Okay. Yeah.
competition. When
Hmm.
Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not had all these things, people loved them. The Cardiff Giant, they knew it was a hoax, but they still came to see it,
Hmm.
which is much different than today. People, if you swindle them out of their money,
Oh
they're
yeah.
not coming back.
And everybody's so skeptical now, like which is, I mean, just how it is, like with the internet and everything, you know, you never know what to believe. You see stuff photoshopped all the time. You can't really believe anything you see. But I mean, some of the stuff I've seen just on YouTube, like videos about like UFOs or different, ghost things. I look at a lot, I'm more into haunted stuff. So looking at a lot of ghost stuff. And I mean, to me, I am like, that looks real. Like I kind of believe it, but I know a lot of people are skeptical, and but
I
that's
think for a
okay.
lot of people today, if they don't see it or video it themselves, they don't believe it. You
Hmm.
could have a UFO land in your backyard, put it on the internet, and within an hour, hundreds of people would tell you how fake it looked.
Right.
So I think that unless somebody sees something today, and sometimes it happens by accident. I had a woman come up to me after a program with her phone, and an older woman, and said, "Oh, I captured this ghost next to me," and showed me a photo of it. And I said, "Okay, email it to me. Let me check it out, get a better view of it." And when she got home that night, she emailed and said, "I'm so sorry. My daughter put a ghost app on my phone without me knowing, that took and put a ghost inserted, much like you used to be able to get at tourist stops, the
Yeah.
Polaroids. You could get those that would insert a ghost in. So it's just a new technology. So
She was
sometimes
pretty excited at first, I bet.
she very excited, thought it
Yeah.
was great, and was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I would be too. um, there's, so many legends about different things. And I was kind of curious about the Wendigo because I actually did not ever hear much about it until I was in Manitowoc and went to, well, the lady that runs the Wendigo Fest.
Hmm.
She has a dead and breakfast there, and we stayed there a few months ago. And so now I really want to go to Wendigo Fest this year. But can you just kind of go over like what it is? I mean, apparently it was more Canadian and started a long time ago. Can you kind of talk about that and kind of just give a little? synopsis of what the Wendigo is
It's
about?
perhaps the oldest legend in North America. So old, the First Nations people don't even know the origin to it. And it started with the First Nation people of Canada. And Alberta, Canada, north of Edmonton, was the ground zero, really, of the Wendigo, which is a myth or superstition, folklore creature that can show up as a flesh and blood type thing. And early reports of it talk about it being somewhere between 8 and 15 feet or 30 feet tall, very thin, skeletal. It has an insatiable hunger for human flesh, which means sometimes it devours its own mouth and lips when prey is not found. And during those harsh winters when prey was nowhere to be found, game, food was nowhere to be found, people would resort to cannibalism. And that's when the Wendigo would show up and either devour you, or worse yet, possess you and turn you into a Wendigo. And we have hundreds and hundreds of documented cases of people that were suspected to be turning Wendigo that were killed by their friends and loved ones so that person would not turn into the Wendigo.
Wow.
And then slowly the legend moved all across Canada to the Great Lakes area of the US, out on the East Coast. And it was this hideous monster that was so terrifying. There were stories of people that heard a Wendigo was in the region. They stayed in their lodging and starved to death rather than risk going out to get food or hunt for game just because someone mentioned a Wendigo was in the area.
Oh my gosh.
So, and most of the people that were affected by the Wendigo, they begged to be killed because they didn't want to turn into a Wendigo and devour their family.
Wow.
Yeah, and
And
most people have
that
never heard of it.
is that still a pretty, like a lot of people still believe in that and talk about it or think they see it? Or is that something that people say they saw, a long time ago and it's just a legend now?
No, I still get reports. I received one recently from the Black Hills of South Dakota, which normally you don't think of as Wendigo territory. But the stories today have changed. If any of your group Google's Wendigo, you'll probably see a depiction of a creature with giant antlers. And that's almost elk looking, the skeletal elk, which the early folklore does not give it any antlers. It's more of this hideous wraith-like monster. But people still have reports. I was doing a lecture in northeastern Minnesota, up by a place called Wendigo Lake in Wendigo Island.
Oh.
And I was doing a program on mysterious creatures of Minnesota. And before the
there you go,
program,
Julie. Mm-hmm.
some elders came up to me and said, I know you're going to talk about a legend in this area. We would appreciate it if you would not mention it. Because many cultures believe merely saying the name of these things is enough to put you on its radar, that it will attract them. So I said, no problem, I'll skip it. I won't mention that creature at all. And those words had no sooner left my mouth than I could see their body language change. All of a sudden, the stress went out of them. They were very concerned that I was going to say the name of the creature, and they were terrified, even today.
Wow. And you have gone so what, tell me about what, kind of the process of what happens if someone wants you to investigate something, or if you hear about something you want to investigate, do you move there for days on end yourself, or is it like a lot of internet studying first and then other stuff, or kind of what's the process?
Well, today's process is that it has to be something very unique. On average, I'll receive about 200 emails a week from people about cases and stories from around the world. And a lot of them are interesting, but they're similar. You saw a Bigfoot creature, it darted across the road, it's gone. Those are fascinating to me, but I can't investigate every single one. So it has to be pretty unique. But for instance, if somebody contacts me with this story, or I hear of an old legend, first thing I do is try to dig up as much information as I can on it. And for that, I'm doing old newspaper archives. I'm doing the Historical Society. But then for me, it's very important to actually visit these places. If it's a haunted cemetery where if you knock on the crypt, a spirit will rise up. I want to see that crypt. I want to try it, figure out why somebody would have this experience there. And that's when you can interview people who have had experiences, locals, old timers, stop at the library, really dig and try to sort fact from fiction. And
are people pretty, like pretty good with talking about it, or are there people that just are like, I don't want to talk about it, or
you get the spectrum. Yeah, the entire spectrum. Years ago, it was a lot different. People would look around and then in a hushed tone whisper to you about their experience. But now people are a little more open, especially of ghosts and hauntings and cryptids. Not quite as much with UFOs. They're still a bit guarded for good reason. But yeah, I think a lot more people, and I think because of the nonstop media that publishes these things. The other night, I happened to be at a hotel, and I don't have cable, so I flipped on like the travel channel, and I thought, where's the travel? It was all paranormal. You turn on the History Channel, and there's no history. It's all paranormal shows.
Ghost hunters and
Yes. So I think the media has helped that in a way that people feel more comfortable talking about it.
And you've been on some TV shows yourself, right? Like, it's mostly like documentaries, or what types of things have you been on?
Gosh, I wish they were all documentaries. So I've done shows, everything from a haunting to Monsters and Mysteries in America, William Shatner's Unexplained, William Shatner's Weird or What, 2 different shows he did. All kinds of these shows, and a lot of them are pretty good. They'd like to get the real background, the history, the folklore, but others are just looking for, teenagers running around with screaming their heads off. That I remember doing a couple shows, a couple episodes for one show. I won't say which one it was. And I was talking about one legend. They used that clip for a story about a different legend.
Oh.
On the same show. They just, and you never
just
know.
Edited it at their own will.
This sounds cool. Let's put it in this one. And you never know, because you film for 4 or 5 hours and then it's down to about a minute or 2. So you're just kind of trusting that they won't make you look like a complete fool. But you never know with that. But unfortunately, today's medium is television for the next few years at least. Whereas back when I started out, some of the most respected researchers were authors who had done research, had done the investigation. And now, unfortunately, I think a lot of these shows are hosted by basically models that know a little bit about the paranormal. They look great.
Yeah.
They look right out of a 90210 type show, but their limited knowledge on the paranormal, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And are paranormal, like ghost type things, the biggest thing you hear about or get asked about?
Without
investigating. Yeah.
Yep. Ghosts and hauntings. Closely second would probably be cryptids of, unknown creatures, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, Wendigo type thing. But without a doubt, haunted places. And not only haunted places, but what's near me and where can I go to experience something?
Oh, okay.
Where can I spend the night at a haunted hotel or lodging? And I've heard from people who mother-daughter weekends that go to these places, bachelor parties, motorcycle clubs, geocaching. So there's an entire paranormal tourism that's based around these places with haunted or supernatural reputations.
Yeah, I'm hoping that eventually with our group, we'll get to a point where we can do meetups at, places or haunted or, travel around and go see stuff together. I think it'd be awesome.
Back in 2002 and 2003, when I was putting together the research with my colleague Terry Fisk for our first book on Wisconsin haunted places, no matter where we went, whether it was a restaurant, a hotel, a theater, they'd say, don't put us in that book because if people find out we're haunted, no one will come here. But then they said, go ahead, put us in that book. Who's going to read that thing anyway? And now we get emails from them saying, thank you for putting us in the book, because people do want to go to these
Yeah.
places.
I've
I
been to a
think
couple. They're excited. It's fun. Even if you
yeah.
don't, even if nothing happens, it's like just the possibility that something could happen. It's exciting.
And I think when all these towns that we live in start to morph together, where we have the same restaurants, the same hotels, the same businesses, people like that uniqueness that you're not going to get this haunted story at the Holiday Inn. You're going to get it at the old creepy lodge on Lake Superior.
Right. And have you, I mean, I'm sure you've been to probably 1,000 different haunted places, but do a few stick out in your mind as like being where you really felt like super creeped out, or that you saw anything, or that you were like, I don't like this vibe, I have to get out of here, anything like that?
I always say that if you're going to these places and you're not getting scared, you're not trying hard enough. They're just downright creepy. One of my favorite places to go is in Sauk Center, Minnesota, which is in the middle of the state. It's an old historic hotel called the Palmer House Hotel. And the reason I love it is that not only does it have a lot of history with the novelist Sinclair Lewis and other things, but it's one of those places where things don't happen in just one room or one area. It happens everywhere. People have all kinds of experiences, and they actually allow you to go downstairs into this creepy, dark, old basement. Legend is there's some bodies buried down there, but who knows? And you can sit there in pitch black darkness, surrounded by, dusty old boxes. And, it wasn't where I was scared where I had to leave, but it was definitely where I was turning on my flashlight more than I needed to. And that's half the fun, getting scared. In a good way. Obviously, if you're being scared from a bank robbery or a kidnapping, that's a different type of scared than this controlled fear of an amusement park or a scary movie where you're safe, but your mind knows that, but your body's still releasing everything as though you're scared. And fear can be just as pleasurable as many other things that we associate with pleasure.
And where have you, like, you've been to quite a few places in other countries, like what types of things have you investigated? What are a few things you've looked at over there? I know you were investigating vampires in Transylvania, I believe, which sounds super cool.
And that's, Transylvania. So I was in Transylvania in Romania. It's a county in Romania, and a lot of it's very rural, like the US would have been 120 years ago. And I was out in the middle of nowhere at this farm little B&B room, no electricity, and it was getting dark and we needed some supplies for the next day. So I said, I'll just run into town, walk in. It's only about a mile and a half away. And all I had with me was this little miner's lamp light thing, totally unprepared. Just LARPing my way through Transylvania.
This is like a bad movie, beginning of a bad movie, yeah.
So I start walking through the woods, and at first it was the same thing you said. I'm in Transylvania. The moon's out. How amazing is this? What fun. But then your mind starts to play tricks where every branch in the woods breaking was Vlad the Impaler coming up to get me. So I ended up running to town, getting the supplies, running back as fast as I could. And I wasn't really scared that a vampire would get me. But it's just more the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That it's hard at these places, especially rural, secluded places, to not pick up your pace. Even if you don't believe in werewolves, if you're walking down Bray Road in Wisconsin, it's hard. You're by yourself, middle of the night, help is nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
It's hard not to let your mind wander.
For sure. And looking through some of these with the Wisconsin road guide to haunted locations, there's a lot of places pretty close to me, I didn't even realize. So I'm gonna have to do a little road tripping, I think, there.
That's the number one thing people say about the books, is that I didn't know I live right here.
Yeah. And I noticed there's a lot of them that have dares associated with them. And so things you're supposed to dare yourself to do at these places, and what might happen if you do it. And where do those come out of? Are those things that have been talked about for years and years, or how do you even find out about these dare things?
Well, the dares is the subject of my latest book that just came out, Supernatural Dares of the Midwest. And
Okay.
what it was is that when doing these books on haunted places, notice that so many of them had things you'd have to do in order for the legend to come true. You'd have to, again, knock on the mausoleum for the spirit to come up, or roll down a hill 3 times and a portal to heaven will open up. And these stories have morphed over the years that they almost become a rite of passage for people, that every new generation has to do that dare in their community. And they become a test of bravery for people, that I can walk down the haunted road longer than you can type thing. And again, as we are no longer in small tribes or communities, those rites of passage that were usually there are gone. And people have looked at these dares as a substitute for them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many patterns with them of having to do things 3 times, or doing it at midnight, or it happening on a bridge, that no matter where you are in the world, there's probably a dare right in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm. And so have you always done the dares when you go to these places?
Well, for me, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these dares. Knock on wood, I'm still here. But I have colleagues that won't do them because they say, why tempt fate? There's probably nothing to it, but why take the chance if you don't have to?
Right.
But these are, I think, some of the most popular things for people to do, because it gives that opportunity to challenge yourself, to face your own fears, to test your bravery, to sit in the devil's chair and see what happens. And I think it just adds a little more danger and excitement for these legends. And I found that doing the first, 10 states of road guides, that was what people wanted to hear more about. Mm-hmm. They wanted to go there with their friends and have some interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, I'm surprised there's a lot close by. I saw the one about the bridge of a bride that supposedly died on this bridge in Point or something. So a lot of these places have true stories behind them, or you think a lot of them are just, folklore that people made up, and, it just goes on and on, generation to generation.
Yes, a little bit of both.
Both.
And sometimes, like the Stevens Point Bloody Bride Bridge you're talking about, the story is that a bride died on the bridge coming home from her wedding night. She bled to death, and now her spirit can be seen walking that bridge in a bloody bridal gown. And we've tracked that story back many decades, but nobody knows the origin. There's no case of somebody actually dying on that bridge that we were able to find. It could have been just so long ago, nobody remembered it. And police records in the old days, all the way through like the early 2000s, if it wasn't a murder or something of that magnitude, usually after about 7 years, those police reports were discarded, thrown away, burned, whatever it was. So they weren't available. But then you do get cases like a place in Cambridge, Illinois called Death Curve, where for years, people would say if you drove this curve, a woman with a bloody axe would come, a ghost, and chase you off the road. You'd crash and die. Well, it turns out that in the early 1900s, a young woman murdered her 7 children with an axe at that location. And that's why people, assuming that they're having these experiences, that's why they're having them, because there's a true story there. Now, is the story connected to the ghost? Again, who knows? But we can at least prove that this really happened.
Right.
That if this place is haunted, there's probably good reason for it, because we think of suicides, murders, serial killers, untimely deaths, accidents as causing hauntings because of the high emotion that comes with them.
Right. Since we have a few people from out of state here, do you have any favorites you want to talk about with Texas for Janet, since she's in Texas? Have you been down there investigating anything?
I have, and Texas is great because it's gigantic and there's stuff everywhere. One of my favorite legends in Texas happened in the 1800s in Aurora, a small little town where a UFO was said to have crashed. And they found this little occupant of the UFO, this little body of what we would consider an extraterrestrial being. And the townsfolk had no idea what to do with it. So allegedly, they buried it in their local cemetery. And nobody's found this grave of it, but locals, authorities won't let anyone dig up these graves and see what's truly in there. So that's one of my favorite stories. I did the hidden headlines you mentioned of Wisconsin. I did a same one for Texas as well. And that has stories of obviously hauntings and weird creatures and the like. But yeah, Texas has, there's not one place in America that you can't throw a rock and hit a legend.
And what about Georgia for Julie? Have been any in
Yeah.
Georgia?
Yeah, I'm just heading back through Georgia next week on my way down to do some skunk ape research in Florida. And Georgia,
I just read something about that looking at your bio. I've never heard of skunk ape. Do you know, Julie, skunk ape? Ring a bell?
yeah, think of a Bigfoot creature that smells like a skunk and looks like an ape. That you have the skunk ape in southern Florida in the Everglades area, the swamplands. That's where it resides. But Georgia has a ton of Bigfoot sightings, which you normally wouldn't think of. But it has a ton of Bigfoot sightings. They even recently opened a Sasquatch museum there near the Great Smokies area, Great Smoky Mountains, if you get a little bit south of there. So again, you can't find some place that doesn't have old legends that go back many years. And these legends are always expanding and new ones are popping up every day. And not just new ones like Slender Man, these internet legends, but real legends of people having experiences.
Yeah, when you mentioned Slender Man, I mean, I kind of like the fact that our state has a lot of famous, creepy, weird things. I mean, we have Dahmer, of course, Ed Gein, the
Yep.
Slender Man thing, Stephen Avery, that whole thing. So there's a lot of pretty famous stuff that goes on around Wisconsin, but I'm sure every state has their big things that they are, I guess they wouldn't say proud of, but I kind of like it. And then Dennis, I don't know if you are still there, can mention where you're from, but let us know if you want to. And then see if there's, I don't know what state you live in. So, and then speaking of Dennis, can you talk a little bit about the UFO things and what you've done or seen with that?
Yeah, I started out with UFO research. Very early in my days, I joined the Mutual UFO Network, which is an international organization looking into UFO research. And I think anyone involved with UFOs right now, it's a pretty good time to be involved because a lot is being released right now. That the US government is actively saying that there are videos of things they don't know what it is. Not saying it's extraterrestrial or interdimensional or anything like that, but admitting that they have no idea, unidentified. And for a lot of people recently, they've been asking, why now? For decades, the response has been misidentification, make people look crazy, deny everything. And now there's that trickling of, yeah, these videos are real. We don't know what they are, but they are not doctored. And I think a lot of people are curious as to why now? Why after decade of misinformation or disinformation, why are you releasing it now? So I'm curious to see what comes in the next few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make you it makes you a little less trusting of government, knowing that all these years they've been denying so many things and all of a sudden they're coming out and kind of admitting it. Seems sketchy.
A lot of it, especially around the Area 51, and I grew up in Albuquerque, so all that Area 51 and Roswell stuff was always the local things, but a lot of the things that happened, especially in the Second World War, are just now being declassified, and there's a lot of really disturbing stuff in there. So that may be part of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably throw that out there.
Dennis, is there anything you want to mention?
And I'd like to ask you, have you ever stumbled across the people who do CE5 protocols where they try to initiate contact with the aliens through meditation and basically praying to them?
Yeah, I have. And early on in my UFO research, I dealt with a lot of abductees or experiencers, as some like to call themselves. And for them, just in my experience, it was not a pleasant thing. It was not something they looked at as wanting to happen. It was altering their life in usually negative ways. So nowadays, people actually, as you said, get together and try to call out or summon these things to them using, altered states or different shining and the different mechanisms they have that they think they can interact and communicate with these. And a lot of that field takes the approach that these things are here to help us, that they're here to guide us, they have information for us, they're these benevolent beings that are looking out for us, where a lot of the people I've encountered, and you could probably talk on this as well, it wasn't like that for them. That it was, a life-altering event, usually leading to post-traumatic stress disorder.
I'd just like to share a little bit about my experience, if you guys don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Perfect.
So basically, I was being contacted by them, and they were, I wouldn't say they were taking me. It was more as though they were replacing my entire reality and showing me this stuff. And they were coming to me as though they were benevolent, right? And they were acting benevolent, and like they had my best interest in mind. So I started reading testimonials and all this stuff, getting into like people's experiences with it. And I found the CE5 people, the people that are trying to contact them. So I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. They seem interested in me. I gave it a shot. It worked. I had a gray alien standing in front of me, right? I couldn't get rid of him after I had him standing in front of me. I was screaming at this thing, get out of my face. And he was tormenting me relentlessly. And the only way, literally the only thing I could do to get rid of this guy was call upon the name of Jesus Christ. And he vanished in front of me after that. So that's my take on the alien phenomenon. I think they're actually demonic entities. I think the world is being deceived greatly by them. And I think the government I think they're rolling out this information because of these people that are actively trying to communicate with them and that believe that they're benevolent. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to throw out there.
Thanks for sharing that. And you're certainly not alone in your, I thought that they're demonic creatures. People contact me all the time. And not only with UFOs, but with spirits as well. People believe that for many of them, it's not a loved one that is passed on. Mm-hmm. It's some demonic spirit.
Yeah, I've seen spirits. I've cast spirits out of people's house in the name of Jesus. I was an atheist for years and years before that encounter with the alien. And ever since that, I'll tell you, I personally met Jesus. He walked out of my wall, told me, I need your help. Told me he basically had me discerning spirits, showed me angels, demons, and myself. And he said, choose whether you want to serve me or serve the devil like you have been. So I chose him. And the path that takes me down is helping people overcome their demonic oppression. And whether that be their house is full of ghosts, they're being sexually assaulted by ghosts in their sleep, they're having sleep paralysis experiences, poltergeist activity, alien abductions. I've talked to people who've offered themselves to the aliens, right, to have them heal their family. And these entities, they'll help you. They'll do what you want. All they want is to take you away from Jesus because they're demonic. It's literally, I think all of this phenomenon, even the cryptid stuff, man, I think it's all demonic. Personally, that's where I'm at. And I've seen a lot of fruit. I've helped set people free. It really is. Yeah, if you're ever being tormented, especially in your mind, it's or at night, and like you can't move when you wake up and seeing shadow figures or aliens, call upon the name of Jesus and it'll stop.
What part of the country are you in?
I'm in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's where Chad's from.
Yep, Sawdust City.
Yeah, I know.
Interesting. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
probably a lot more people than we would think out there that have had bad experiences with either ghosts or aliens or different things. But you know, a lot of people don't want to tell anybody about it because they'll think I'm crazy. So,
Yeah.
but once they find out,
No,
find someone like you that understands or that believes
Oh, yeah.
them, all of a sudden they're gonna
I'll tell you,
be coming to you. You know.
I was terrified to start sharing my testimony with people. You know, I was scared to tell my family about it. But I'll tell you right now, like, it's the truth. It really is. And I'll tell it to anyone who listen. I don't care if they look at me like I got my head on backwards. You know, like seriously, it's the truth. So I'll tell it to anyone who listen to me.
How did you know in the beginning that they were trying to contact you, or that they were, you know, reaching out to you, kind of like by seeing them or feeling it, or seeing them in your, you know, actually seeing them, or just seeing them in your mind, or how?
The first interaction I ever had with them was driving down the road, middle of the day, probably 2 p.m, right? 5 UFOs in the sky in front of me. Me and my friend were driving. I looked over at him. He's like, looked over at me. We're like, what are we looking at? And one by one, we watched them vanish. So that started like a fascination for me.
It's kind of nice you
And
had
then
someone
I
else
had
with you.
another-
That's somebody else with you
Yeah.
that could vouch for you,
And then
right?
Oh yeah. And then I had another experience where basically I was in my bedroom, right? And all of a sudden my entire reality was replaced. And I was now inside of what it was like I was in a hologram. And I was being shown by these gray aliens. They're like showing me how they created the human race. They created the human race, and we're all this experiment for them. And right now it's not looking so hot for all of us. So we better like change the way we're living as a society, right? So it's not looking so hot for us. And we're basically in a trial experiment right now. And they're telling me somehow I'm going to play a role in it. And then I was just put back in my bedroom, right? And yeah, then I started reading about people's experiences, and I found the people that were trying to contact them, and I tried, and it worked. And yeah, the rest is history.
Do a lot of people that have had experience similar things? Similar how they look, or similar of how they talk, or what they talk about?
Yeah, there seems to be a couple different races of aliens that people seem to encounter. There's either like typically grays, or there's what look like miniature humans, I guess. Some of them are reptilian in nature. Yeah, I don't have all the answers for you, but I do know that like what I was experiencing were typical gray aliens. And I actually found a while after my experience, I stumbled across Aleister Crowley's depiction of an entity named Lam, Lam. Spot on for what I saw. Literally spot on. And he said he opened a portal and, like, you know, invited them to this world. And, you know, whether or not that's the case, I think they were probably here already. But, you know, I think the demonic is working really hard in this world to deceive anyone in any way they can. All they want to do is deceive you. They'll tell you to better your life. They'll tell you 100 ways to make your life better, as long as it takes you away from Jesus, because that's the only thing. Jesus is literally is God. He's defeated the demons. The demons know for sure. They know they're doomed. At the end of time, they're going to hell forever, right? They want you to come with them. They want you to be tormented with them because you're made in the image of God. And yeah, they want you to believe literally anything besides Jesus. Anything besides Jesus. And I'll tell you what, I wanted anything besides Jesus. I was involved in some like, energy work and Wicca and like different occult stuff. And I was actually a member of the Satanic Temple at one point. I've got like garbage satanic tattoos on me and stuff. Like, I was heavily involved in the New Age. I wanted anything besides Jesus. But that's the reality I came to, is that it's the truth. Jesus is the truth. Everything else is demonic. I don't think there's any ghosts. I think they're all demons. Yeah, I don't know. That's just where I'm at. And I've seen a lot of people set free from their torment. So, yeah. If you guys know anyone that's being tormented or needs help like that, feel free to have them reach out to me.
Okay.
I'll talk to anyone.
Chad, does that story sound similar to other ones you've heard of how they act or look? Or
I've had people, one gentleman in my early days thought at night these demonic forces were attacking him on his legs, not physically, but spiritually. And so we went there and spent a couple nights watching him sleep. Nothing happened, but he was very religious and he had stopped going to his services. And when he started going back, for him, that worked for him, for people. But, when a lot of this happens around the world, so you're dealing with a lot of different belief systems, a lot of different cultures, and people view it differently around the world.
Right. Mm-hmm. Are there a lot of, in other countries, are there a lot of UFO sightings, or is it more an American thing?
Oh, it's worldwide, and a lot of other countries have been more forthcoming with the reports than the U.S. Again, the U.S. until recently has not talked about it or made anybody who has seen these things feel like they're crazy.
Right. Interesting. Well, Dennis, thanks for sharing all that. It's really interesting. And I mean, I'm glad you're out there helping people, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that might contact you now because of this, if they hear you here. So thanks for sharing all that. Chad, can we also talk about a little bit about Loch Ness Monster? I'm assuming you've been to Loch Ness. Have you?
Loch Ness is great. If you've never been, just for the atmosphere of it. A beautiful loch in Scotland. You're surrounded by bluffs and beautiful cliff areas and the hills. A gorgeous area. It does have this, you don't need a great imagination to think that there's some mythic creature in there, because it does have this atmosphere of this is a special place. And people have been seeing something that shouldn't be in there. This giant leviathan of the deep that shouldn't be there, but yet seemingly for hundreds of years it is. Yeah, so Loch Ness, and if you don't want to go to Scotland, we have our equivalent here in the Midwest, Lake Pepin with Peppy the Lake Monster, which has a $50,000 reward attached to it. But nearly every state in the U.S. has lake monster stories. These stories often date back to the 1800s and continue to this day, of people seeing some either unknown species of animal in the water or one that's thought to have gone extinct a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. You would think with nowadays, with everybody having a cell phone on them at all times. Hold on. Okay. That there would be more pictures, or maybe there are there pictures popping up of these things all the time, but people just think they're photoshopped, or are they even showing up at all?
One thing
are they all the old pictures? One
thing I've noticed is that people say, obviously we have more cameras now, trail cameras, game cameras. People have cameras on their doorbells. The phone, obviously everyone has a camera. But what I've discovered talking to witnesses is that a lot of these sightings of things, they're fleeting. They're not a 20-minute interaction with these things. It's often just darting out of the corner of your eye, something like that. But a lot of the witnesses I've spoken with, they claim that it didn't even occur to them to grab their phone. That in their mind, they're trying to figure out what the heck they're witnessing. And then after it's finished, they thought, why didn't I get out my phone? But even so, by the time somebody swipes, put in their fingerprint or their password, gets to their phone, gets to the camera, the event's done. But the overwhelming majority of people, it doesn't even occur to them to do it, which you think's a little weird.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of pictures of things, I have something I want to show you. And there's a girl I know that she's in the group who her house has been haunted by a ghost for a long time. And it was just basically one of these ones that flickers on the lights off and on, or, she'll turn the TV off and go to a different room, come back and it's on again, toilet flush it, all these kinds of things. And I think they named it Bob. But it was, and I don't want to say her name because she did, when this originally happened, she has a couple pictures of it that I could show you. And she, when I first heard it, I'm like, why don't you call ghost hunters or somebody? Like I'm thinking if that was me, I'd be calling everybody to come, stake it out, interview me, get on all these shows or whatever. And she's like, no, I don't want people to know. I don't want people driving by my house, knocking on the door to come in and see if they can see my ghost and all this kind of stuff. So I get it. But so if she's listening, I don't know if I'll have this story completely right because it's been years since she told me, but so this ghost was always, doing this kind of thing. And I think it was her and a few other people in her family were in the living room, and the daughter went to the kitchen to get something. And she came back in and was like, there's a guy in our kitchen. And they're like, what, and they get up and go look, and they could see this ghost. And she somehow luckily thought to pick up her phone and quick take a couple pictures, and it was fading as she's taking them. But to me, it looks pretty clear. But I'm just going to show you here. So I'm going to share my screen. And then let me know when you can see a picture.
I see a calendar.
Okay. So this light in the middle here, if you can see the lips and then a nose and eyes, and kind of maybe a chest and arm here. And then it turned, let's see, which way do I gotta go? And then it turned, so now it's a little bit almost profile. And you can see his eyelid, nose, lips, and like maybe a beard or chin. But when I saw these, like I had goosebumps. Like I thought, wow, to me that's pretty good evidence.
And a lot of people find, a lot of people find this after the fact. They don't encounter it while it's happening. They're flipping through old photos and notice things afterward.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That happens quite a bit. Yeah, a lot of people send me stuff saying just at a Christmas party or whatever and took a bunch of photos and looked back and discovered this. What is it?
And then another thing with her and that ghost, and again, if I get the story wrong to the girl who this is, let me know, but this is the gist of it. And it was, years that this ghost was there, and they had a fire in their house. One morning she was already at work. Her older kids were still there before school, and they all got out, and the fire was contained mostly to the kitchen area. And when like the investigator came to see, what started it and everything, it got to a point, they could tell it was like, I think the dishwasher area started the fire, but it got to a point where all of a sudden the fire just stopped. Like he could tell that it should have kept going, like it should have kept burning a certain way or whatever, and the house probably all burning down, and it just stopped at a certain spot. So in her mind, she felt that Bob saved her kids from burning and dying in the fire. And who knows? maybe it's true.
Yeah, who
But
knows?
it's a pretty, I don't know, it's pretty cool evidence that people, find with this stuff. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, if you're
Um,
ever bored, Fate magazine, which is the oldest paranormal magazine in the US, all their archives are available, and they have people who wrote in with their true experiences. And it's just amazing to just read through some of those from the 60s and 70s and just the amazing stories people had.
what is it called? Fate?
Fate,
Maybe?
Fate.
Okay.
And
I'll
it's
have to
still
look that
going
up.
today. It's still a magazine of the strange and unusual.
Mhm. Did you have any pictures of anything or anything you wanted to share or talk about your new book or any of your other things you have going on?
I didn't bring anything.
Okay.
My interest lay similar to yours. I love the stories of Geen and
Mm,
Dahmer and some of the hauntings that are thought to be based on the activities of those men and others as well. If you go down to the Chicago area, you can take H.H. Holmes tours today and see where he did his sinister deeds in the old days. And again, the macabre, the true crime, that is more popular today than ever.
mhm.
I think because of all the Dateline shows, 60 Minutes, all of those, true crime, there's nothing more popular today.
And it's kind of, I think because of basically what you studied, psychology, like just to try to understand why people do things, and to watch something like that and you're kind of horrified, but yet again, you're really interested, think what drove somebody to do that or what triggered it or whatever, like those things are fascinating. So I
I
think
did a
that's,
book on
yeah, go
I
ahead.
did a book on the most gruesome hauntings of the Midwest, and that was again serial
Oh,
killers, mob hits. Yeah.
have
And
it.
I can tell you the year and a half that I worked on that, writing it, not just researching it, but just writing it. I had the weirdest and most terrifying dreams I'd ever had. Where it was, I often joke, but after doing a chapter or two, I would then go binge some Hallmark Christmas movies just to cleanse the palate a bit.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, it can get to be a bit much at times for sure. Yeah. Is there any other places in particular that stand out that you want to talk about with places you've been or something you've seen, different country or America, anywhere in particular?
Well, I think what's interesting is that a lot of other cultures around the world, they really take these legends in a more serious tone than we
Mm,
do here in the US. That again, they feel these things are something you don't meddle with, that you avoid them. They're cautionary tales. Stay away from this place. Do not invite this into your life because when you go looking for the weird, sometimes the weird will come looking for you.
mhm.
And that's what I love is traveling the world and talking to people who have a different perspective than we do here in the US, where it's more fun, touristy. But in other countries, it's taken as a more cautionary tale.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. I can think of different things where I've seen where people are like that, where they're like, they don't want you to talk about it. They don't want to bring it up. They don't want to, go there or anything. So that's true. Um, let's see. I'm trying to think I know what the other one was I wanted to ask about was Mothman, because I've heard of it, but I don't really know much about it. And I don't know if it's in one of the books I have or not, but I just wanted to ask what it is, where it is, and what it's about.
Well, Mothman, the stories began in Point Pleasant, out on the east coast of the US. And in the 1960s, people began seeing a weird flying humanoid type creature. It was chasing cars out in an abandoned TNT area out in the country. And people were encountering it. And then all sorts of weirdness happened when some researchers showed up and started investigating it. You started getting UFOs and different creatures or beings communicating with the witnesses and all kinds of oddities and anomalies. And then, of course, the bridge collapsed, many people died, and then it took on a whole new life as this harbinger of death, that it was this death omen. And since then, when the movie came out based on John Keel's Mothman prophecies, it exploded. I mean, everybody knows about the Mothman. It's one of the most well-known cryptids out there, probably behind the Loch Ness monster. And the sightings continue not only there, but throughout the country of people seeing these huge bat-like creatures. What they are, who they are, why they are, we don't know.
Interesting. Do you guys have any questions you want to ask Chad or anything, or any stories you know of that you want to talk about or anything like that?
I just like to
I'd
ask
like
Chad.
to hear your take on.
Oh, go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Dennis, why don't you go ahead?
I was going to ask, besides Caryville, what would you say the most notoriously haunted area in the Eau Claire or Chippewa Valley is?
Yeah, well, I like Mary Dean, which is right next to Caryville. It's the old boat landing down the road a bit, and you have stories of hellhounds. You have stories of this phantom siren in the water, Mary Dean, and you can camp out on the island. UFO sightings, mysterious drownings, you name it. So I like that. I also like the old Sheely House in Chippewa Falls is fun to go investigate or to hang out if that's your sort of macabre sense of adventure. But yeah, I love Mary Dean, which is just literally half a mile from Caryville.
Julie, what did you want to say?
I was just going to ask, what's the most surprising thing you've ever seen?
For me, it's always just little things enough to make you wonder, did that really happen? Catching stuff that wasn't on our, catching things on camera that we didn't see with the naked eye, or hearing things that may not appear on audio, but you could hear it, or vice versa. But for me, it's always little things. It's never anything where people are speaking in tongues or things are flying across the room or anything amazing. It's always just subtle enough to make you question whether it was supernatural or something else.
Mhm.
And a lot of my other colleagues have had other experiences, but for me, you know, I can count on probably one hand the times I would say something was really, really odd.
Sorry, I got this going. I'm just looking at, there's some, Shannon, I don't know if you're still out there. She had, on Facebook, she said she was raising her hand, so I don't know if that means she had a question or not. But if she is. Shannon, I don't know if maybe she's.
Chad, I've got something for you.
Sure.
Have you seen any I guess ties between people experiencing paranormal activity and different spirituality practices that they have in their lives? Like, for instance, like, you know, maybe they practice Hinduism or something, you know, like any ties you've ever seen between different spiritual practices and phenomenon in their life?
Yeah, I haven't studied a lot of the world's religions and supernatural. I ended up doing my master's thesis on students' belief in the supernatural and whether they mark themselves as on the scale of religiosity, how religious they are, or how spiritual they were, affected some things as well. That when I asked if people believed in angels or demons, obviously, you know, the more religious somebody was, the more likely they were to believe in that. But I also found that people believed in the possibility of these things merely based on a loved one having an experience. So that even if somebody didn't have an experience themselves, if somebody they trusted had an experience, they were more likely to believe in that possibility. But I think I'll email you one of my colleagues, Terry Fisk, who I've written several books with from the Eau Claire area. He's very did his academic stuff in religious studies, and he's really interested in that. And I think you two would have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Reach out to me either on Facebook or whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Very cool. Okay, well, I guess it's been a little over an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up unless there's anything else anybody else wants to ask or talk about. But I really appreciate you, Chad, making time. We've been trying to go back and forth, trying to find a time or a day that works for both of us, and took a little bit, but I appreciate it because I know you have a busy schedule and you're doing a lot of talking and lecturing and things like that, and podcasts and everything else. Do you have your own podcast?
I do not.
Maybe you should.
When I was in Eau Claire, back in the early days, we did a local radio station that's no longer there, but we did a radio show there, but that was before anyone knew what podcasts were. But I enjoy being on them and not having to do the work of the actual podcasters. So yeah, thank you for having me, and keep an eye out.
Oh, I will. All right. Well, everybody have a good night, and thanks again. And hopefully we'll see you at the next Meet the Creep night. There should be another 2 coming up this month. I'll let you know the details soon. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah.